Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. Time to plod on another day of one foot in front of the other and getting through. And as long as we're allowed to read the news to you and comment upon how dumb it actually is, we'll continue to do so. Lots to catch up on, as usual, and it's scattered. It's all over the place. Pocket is full of blind leads to Blue Sky posts. Blue Sky blowing up in the last couple of days as people eventually give up on Twitter. And I guess one of the latest professional outfits to give up on Twitter is The Guardian newspaper, or at least the way I read it. It was a little oddly worded, but that their editorial accounts would no longer be posting there. Moving over to Blue Sky, which seems to be the landing spot of choice in the last couple of days. There's also lots of other alternatives out there, but this one seems to be the one where everyone is landing and saying, hey, I think I could get used to this, and hey, I think I found all the people, or a lot of the people I used to follow on Twitter. It's nice. It has a nice feeling to it. And it would be great if, some of the few remaining advantages that, for instance, that Greg has mentioned about the ability to embed tweets in blog posts, which doesn't yet exist with Blue Sky. I am sure they're working on it. They have a pretty responsive customer service team, tech team that actually I've seen them quite a bit engaging on Blue Sky and asking people about the features that they want, or responding about why they can or can't create such features. So that's kind of nice. I don't know how long that lasts, given the explosive growth, but anyway, like I said, news all over the place coming minute by minute. The crazy ratchet is only going to increase as we get closer to, I guess, what will be Trump's second inauguration. For whatever reason, we're going to go forward with it. There's very little reason to think there's a reasonable alternative out there that people are going to hit upon. But so news is breaking as we speak. It's coming across on social media. It's stuck in Pocket, and they're blind links in Pocket. It's in my email as The Hill completely demolishes my inbox with all of those guys really promote their stories very aggressively, and it works. And they're on top of the kind of news that I want to be talking about, even if they don't often report it from a perspective I appreciate as much. But it's worth raising the issues. So there's lots going on, as I mentioned. Cabinet picks that have come in since yesterday. I guess the one that you might all be most interested in, for whatever reason, Pete Hegseth. I don't know anything really about Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, I think his current job is he's like one of the couch guys on Fox and Friends. Like when you tune in to the morning chat, light chat news / analysis / cooking segment / hot Christmas gifts stuff on Fox News Channel in the morning. Fox and Friends is it. And Pete Hegseth is one of those guys. And, so here's how I remember him. This jumped right out, and I was like, am I remembering this right? Is this the guy who said, and I don't remember why he said it or in what context, but who said that he doesn't wash his hands, that he hadn't washed his hands in 10 years plus, and that he didn't believe in germ theory. I don't know whether he had any, I don't know whether he had any health benefit claims from not washing his hands. And I suspect he's being, childish and simplistic about it. I mean, I like, for instance, I assume he showers once in a while and then uses his hands in there to get himself clean, and, soap gets on him and he accidentally washes his hands. But I guess what he means, he doesn't go out of his way to wash his hands, like after using the restroom or something like that. But, I don't know. It just seemed like it was just a childish, pig-headed thing to insist on. And it sounds like it was something that maybe came out during the pandemic or something to prove what a big denialist he was. And, I can understand that. somebody had said, yeah, this is performative lying. You're just trying to make it look like you're the most Trumpy whoever trumped or whatever. But, because I don't know how you get through life the other way. First of all, you should have died of disease at some point earlier on. But secondly, like, if it was literally, I've never washed my hands, or I haven't washed my hands for 10 years, I never do that. Like, your hands, I know you don't believe in germ theory, you can't see germs, but can you see that smelly brown stuff on your hands, whatever it might be? Dirt, food, oil, whatever. Nothing ever gets on your hands where you just feel like, hey, my hands feel uncomfortable. I want to wash them. I want to stop getting this on my $1,000 suit. I want to, not repel others for various reasons during the day. This never, it essentially exposes the lie, but then to what end? Who cares? But anyway, right, so that guy, Secretary of Defense. Now, he's been in the armed forces and, rocketed through the ranks to the rank of major in the National Guard. But, all right, and you don't have to necessarily have done X, Y, or Z in order to be Secretary of Defense. And we'll just say this. I don't know that Putin would have picked him, but he can't be disappointed. And the good news is they'll be saving so much money now that there's going to be a government efficiency effort. We have to get to that yet with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, I'm sorry. I remember now Greg pronouncing that one for me. As the heads of this effort, apparently, as they're having to call it in the newspapers, on government efficiency, the only government department with two heads. So there's your government efficiency for you. But Hegseth gets defense, and I'm sure Putin couldn't be happier. And think of all the money that they'll save, not only on sterilizing equipment for surgery in the army hospitals, wound kits, you won't need those anymore, digging latrines, that's out. I don't know whether anybody actually, I don't know how they construct latrines these days, but that's out. You just, take care of your business wherever you want. Germs don't exist. And of course, I assume we disassemble everything having to do with bio-warfare. No munitions for it. Certainly they don't work. Why bother with defenses? Throw away your gas mask. I wonder whether Hegseth did that while he was in the armed forces. I don't believe in germ warfare. Bio-warfare doesn't scare me. No such thing. I can't see him. Well, we got a lot to sift through. Greg Dworkin is here. He'll sift through some of it. He believes in germs. Good morning, Greg.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I do believe in germs, even though you can't see it. But the way Daily Kos described your cabinet picks there is Elon Musk appointed to head a department that doesn't exist, which seems about right.
Yes, that's an excellent point. I did see somebody making that point on social media. They announced it as the Department of Government Efficiency. That's an inside online joke about making DOGE, Doge. But there is no such department, and normally, under the real rules, presidents can't just create departments that create.
Right, I was going to ask you about that. That's like a Congress thing, right?
Yes, but screw those guys because they're out. He got rid of advice and consent for his appointees, or he asked them to please get rid of it. So I don't know. So now it'll be a battle over, there'll be certain news outlets that will call it the Department of Government Efficiency, and others that will trip over themselves trying to come up with some moniker for it so we're talking about that entity, but not acknowledging that it's a department.
Well, my favorite analysis of this actually comes from the Times of India.
Oh.
India.
Well,
where it says, why Musk Ramaswamy's Doge sounds like a Yes Minister spoof. In Yes Minister, bureaucracy isn't just a system, it's a labyrinth engineered to perpetuate itself. The civil servants, led by Sir Humphrey Appleby, genius, expertly stonewall any attempt to change, wielding obscure regulations and jargon as weapons. Similarly, Doge, spearheaded by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, is set to streamline, yet like Hacker's Ministry, Having the minister named Hacker is also genius. Doge faces a government machine skilled in red tape and averse to rapid change. Doge's task, applying startup efficiency to a complex bureaucracy, is an audacious Manhattan Project in its own right, but in an uncanny reflection of Yes Minister satire, the new U.S. Department of Government Efficiency sounds straight out of the Ministry for Administrative Affairs, a fictional British institution infamous for its comically circular logic and dedication to preserving inefficiency.
Okay.
Right? So the whole plot of Yes Minister is you follow the bumbling minister Jim Hacker as he rises in the ranks, and his appointed guardian is, of course, Sir Humphrey Appleby, who thwarts him at every turn because he simply cannot keep up with what's really going on. And that sounds like what's going on here. But let's talk about some other actual departments.
All right.
This list comes from NPR this morning, and it's surprisingly not as terribly horrible as it could have been, although parts of it are really terribly horrible.
Okay.
It's the old...
the start of it
I thought things were
going
to be terribly horrible, but I'm relieved to find out they're just horrible.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, right. As they started out, the first one that I heard was Susie Wiles.
Yeah, Susie Wiles, chief of staff.
That might make some sense.
And she's all right. She's basically an institutionalist. Certainly she could work with Ron DeSantis, but grew to hate DeSantis, so, there's that going for her.
Yeah, I guess that's a plus.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of Florida, if Marco Rubio moves to Secretary of State,
yes,
again, that's not the worst appointment that Trump's going to make by any means.
No.
One can argue that you may not like him, but at least he's qualified.
Yeah,
but that opens
sure,
up a Senate seat in Florida.
Yes.
And Ron DeSantis is resisting pressure from the Trump camp to appoint Lara Trump.
All right. I love it. Resist. I mean, They'll kill him, but...
They'll kill him, but, I don't know. I don't know what'll happen there. Anyway, Lara Trump is extremely unqualified, and having yet another family member as part of the government, I think, is, terribly horrible.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's always Ivanka. Oh, wait, she's part of the family, too. Damn.
So, she lives... I don't know where she lives.
Right.
She lives in Dubai, I think.
She's all 50 senators.
Deputy Chief of Staff is probably the worst appointment that's going to be made. That's Stephen Miller.
Yeah, well.
And although Deputy Chief of Staff is a very narrow title, he's basically going to be in charge of sending everybody who isn't named Miller to some other country.
Mm-hmm. Yes, somehow.
Which is the weird thing. I'm going to skip down to the Central Intelligence Agency Director, John Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe is an institutional, he's a former congressman. He's served in the governor before. He previously served as the Director of National Intelligence, so he's not a terrible choice for CIA as far as that goes.
I mean,
but the thing that makes it good, if there is such a thing as good, is Kash Patel wanted that job.
Okay.
And Tom Homan, who's now in charge of the border, as the border czar, will probably deport Kash Patel. So that's the funny part.
Well,
I needed that job. I mean, I needed that job. I didn't just want that job. I needed that job.
That's okay. I'm okay
Tom
with
Homan
that one.
Wants to deport everybody, so that's not a surprise.
Sure.
So Department of Homeland Security, who will be Homan's boss, is Kristi Noem. So make sure your dog is not outside unaccompanied, please.
Right. And if and wearing a vest, really, no matter where they are.
Qualified? No. But there it is. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, as you said. And the funny part...
Look at the picture.
Well, his big thing is women shouldn't be in combat.
Well, no one should be in combat.
That's what I say.
Let's be honest. Sure. Okay. That's a big
not just male
deal
lives
for him,
matter,
I guess.
All lives matter.
That's right. Right. And it's a lot easier to just say all than to try to discuss the number of genders people might decide there are at any given time. I can't keep up. I don't want to offend anybody. So we'll just say all. people. And really, who should be in combat? Nobody. Let's all just get
Andrew
along.
Desiderio points out that Lisa Murkowski was asked about the Hegseth appointment, and she just said, wow, I don't know if it can get confirmed. Bill Cassidy was asked and said, I have no idea who he is.
I didn't see the tweet. I've never seen Fox. Yeah. Sure. He's not like a standout there. Although this photo of him would make him seem as much. This is, I guess, okay. It is taken at a National Patriot Awards, which is not a thing as far as I know.
Well, maybe he was singing.
At the Grand Ole Opry. So that makes more sense. They have this picture of him, which essentially is like, we're not still in the times of India.
And a cowboy hat.
Yeah, and a tux. But and there's I don't know, the embroidery on the lapels. It's a cowboy tux.
It looks like he's running for sheriff, and he's at a sheriff's roast.
Yeah, maybe that, or like this is like a Russian's idea of what sheriffs look like. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, there's a Texan oil baron. If they were making a campy film, that's what this guy. All right, it's a good picture.
Right. White House counsel Bill McGinley, never heard of him, been there before. Probably not the worst pick ever.
I missed that one. Okay.
Because Stephen Miller's the worst pick ever.
Oh, right. Well, yeah. It's a high bar.
Let's see, who do we have? State Rubio, we mentioned. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who's a Florida congressman.
Yeah.
Again, not the worst thing in the world.
No, it's good to have some vacancies.
Homeland Fortisar is absolutely terribly awful, as is U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, who's going to destroy Israel because that way the rapture comes.
Yeah, I mean that's his
thing.
Shtick. It occurred to me that so now I think the plan is they destroy Gaza. Jared Kushner builds high-rise towers there, and then they try to deport all American Jews to these towers, and then Mike Huckabee lights the fuse.
Right, and given the fact that I would rather have Elon Musk at a department that doesn't exist, which nobody has to pay attention to, and also that it's not RFK Jr., putting Lee Zeldin at the EPA.
Oh.
Isn't the worst possible thing.
I mean,
those other two would be the worst possible thing.
Yeah, there's plenty of worse possible. The Lee Zeldin one made me say only, well, I remember Lee Zeldin, and he's not great, but I mean, I can't remember anything he ever said about the environment. He's probably terrible on it.
He opposed a handful of climate-related legislation. That's about it. He's a Republican.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't going to get somebody who was like, well, I'm the shining exception to the whole. So, okay.
Right.
I'm sort of flipping through. Is there any that we missed?
I mean, the one we're waiting on is what's he actually going to do with RFK Jr. So far, RFK Jr. is on the outs because he opposed Marco Rubio as Secretary of State.
Oh.
Why he would do that, I don't know. But telling Trump he can't do something is really a bad move. So hopefully...
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hopefully Trump will do what he usually does with contractors, not pay them and screw them.
Yeah, I mean, that's all right with me. And that may, for all I know, look, that may have been the plan all along. He was running against him, and at some point he must have criticized Trump. So, okay, I'll use you to get over the line and get elected and then jettison you, whether you do something wrong or not.
Right.
So that may easily have been it.
Now, there are a few things worth mentioning about this blue sky thing, which, as you said, is starting to take off a little bit. Chris Hayes covered it last night. I didn't see it, but he tweeted, or he skeeted, or he sent out a post on Blue Sky about it.
Yeah. All right. I have yet to pick up on the
Blue Sky. It's not bleats.
They say skeet.
They say skeets. I don't.
But
then again, I still call it Twitter.
Yeah, right. So, I don't know. Okay, I mean, tweets never made any particular sense. It just, there it was. All right. Skeets, he posted, and then he did a thing on the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see the show, but I heard
it was good.
I will tell you, again, one of the things that I found, which was really cool, is somebody put together a master list of starter packs.
Okay.
Every starter pack.
That seems like too many.
A starter pack. If somebody takes the trouble, let's say, of putting together all of the podcasts you like to listen to,
Right.
that are on Blue Sky.
Me.
And you open up the
That's it.
starter pack, you click one button, and you follow all 150 people at once.
It's the
So there's
party
a starter
line.
pack for legal people. There's a starter pack for journalists. There's a starter pack for politics. There's a starter pack for whatever.
Yeah.
And somebody put together a
Might not be
master
good.
list, 1,700 starter packs, so you could search and find, okay, religion.
There
Here's
are
the
some weird
starter
ones.
packs. I can click those 3, and now I'm covering people who cover religion. And I like to do that. Samuel Perry and some other sociologists have interesting things to say about Christian nationalism. I like to follow those things. It's part of my Twitter list.
Well.
And so it's an easy way to get hundreds of people to follow.
Yeah,
that
if you don't know what
might
to
find
do.
interesting in niche areas. You might find one that, congressional process.
You might.
3 people on the list.
Right.
You already know who they are. There's Sarah Binder, there's you, there's one other person, but
Yeah.
still.
Right, and some of those guys will be like, I'll switch when Ringwis moves.
Right, but the point is, if he does, and everybody does, that's cool. I am not really, following who leaves and who stays and for what reason. There's 2 major arguments I've seen Caroline Orr and some other folks make about staying on Twitter. One is not ceding the place to the Nazis, just as a matter of principle. But the other is not to live in a blue sky bubble, so we at least see what's going on, even if you want to spend like 98% of your time over at Blue Sky. At least peek in and see what's happening. And
There
then,
are
of
many
course, I
reasons.
sent you a screenshot. My issues with Daily Kos is that it doesn't embed yet. So I
Right.
sent you a screenshot of exactly what it looks like and the difference. And I don't like the way Blue Sky looks.
Well, yeah. Then that may be something they work on in the
When they get it,
near
I'll
future.
start using them.
There's plenty of reasons why people linger or at least hold on to accounts. More and more people are just abandoning them or deleting everything, and there's lots of reasons to do that too. I hope we won't spend too much time talking about making excuses one way or the other. I still
that's the
have
thing,
the account.
Don't scold people. People
Yeah.
have their reasons
I mean-
for doing what they do. Somebody on Daily Kos said this morning, you're just doing it as a matter of convenience. Well, if
some.
you consider putting together the pundit roundup as a job or a task, I'm going to pick the tools that work for me, and you're going to pick the tools that work for you.
Yeah. Well,
Don't
you're
scold
not
about
bringing
it.
Nazi content to Daily Kos. I understand what they're talking about. You don't want to feed the monster, and eventually we won't have to. But for now, we extract what we need from it. I haven't posted on there, but I have kept the account, mostly so that I can say, when I get new followers on Blue Sky, I say, go back to Twitter. Do I know that guy? I do? All right, great. All right, I'll follow him back then. I'm trying to, when I get time, who are all these new followers? And I check if I can. Now the volume is too high. Did they follow me on Twitter? Okay, well then I'll follow them back. So I use it as a tool to have more engagement on Blue Sky. So there's many ways you could use
whatever
Twitter.
works for you.
Yeah. And it's been real interesting. The starter pack thing, I think, is interesting, mostly because the chief complaint people have had when they migrate over from Twitter is, this place is dead, there's nobody here, there's no engagement going on. And it's because on Twitter, when you sign up a new account, they just impose an algorithm on you and say, here's some things that are popular that are being said. And they feed you stuff, and you might not like it, you might love it, whatever, you build your own from there. But they, basically, when you sign up, they throw Elon's starter pack at you.
Right. Which
and
I don't want. And
Right.
speaking of, there's other sites, as you mentioned, Threads is dying because they
Yeah.
refuse to even tolerate any of this discussion stuff.
I don't know what
And
that is supposed to
Mastodon
mean.
is dying, not in terms of use. Everybody uses it, except it's like Yogi Berra,
Yeah.
Nobody goes here anymore. It's too crowded.
Essentially.
The problem is it's just too unwieldy. It's really difficult to use. In fact, if I haven't been there for a month and then I go, I have to teach myself how to use it again.
Yeah, it's a little weird. But yep, so the starter pack gets you past the how come nobody's saying anything. Well,
Right.
click these buttons and these people will say things to you.
Well, but also Blue Sky has 2 interesting feeds that are like automatic. One is, people you follow. Of course, that's the one you probably want.
Yes.
But it also has people your friends follow.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
that turns out to be, that's at least as interesting as the ones I picked. Now I find
agree.
new people that I want to talk to.
Yeah.
Some of whom are old people because they already know them.
Right. You just have to know what buttons to press to start seeing the lists of people that you might want to consider, and then you build a list. They don't force one on you, and that's nice.
Yeah. Anyway, so again, it's a good place to be. I like the idea of being there. Don't, take the attitude, I moved there, therefore you have to, because obviously everything I do is the right thing for the right reasons, and so why didn't you?
Aha. All right, I won't.
Okay, good.
Done.
So speaking of that, we're just about at the end of the first segment here.
Yes.
But this guest essay from Andy Beshear in the New York Times is worth spending some time on. I'm the governor of Kentucky, he tells us, in case you didn't know.
Well, he is.
Here's how Democrats can win again.
I see. In Kentucky, anyway.
Well, he's not just talking about diners in West Virginia. The part I want to read after the break is his defense of LGBTQ.
That
folks,
sounds good.
Because he's spent 5 years running against it and winning when people try to pull those weird commercials on him.
I see. Yes. All right. Well, that is worth doing because, there's a flood of these articles about people who survived in red areas. And, too many of them are, how about the way to survive as a Democrat is stop being one, start saying all the Republican stuff, but remember to tell people that you're still a Democrat and then it will work. Well, how do we know this? It worked for me 2 times. All right.
In this particular area.
Right. That's not exactly great, great. It's not always great advice. It's fantastic if I want to take your seat, but that's not what you meant.
I want to be you, but otherwise I'm not sure it works for me.
Yeah, well, this one seems more broadly applicable, and I'm appreciative of that, and we'll hear it when we come back. Time for another Coldie's Lozenge, brought to you by me saying that a lot.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or 2 would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, where we have a new segment on the show. Interesting Elon Musk comments.
Well, he tweeted this morning, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Then he adds, the merch will be lit.
Mm-hmm.
The merch.
Yeah.
It's another grift.
Yeah, well, it all is, and he just doesn't... I don't know. It's hard to tell. He could be joking, and it's hard to tell because he's not funny. Or he might not be joking, and it's hard to tell because he has no idea what is legal and what isn't, and he doesn't care because he's got $300 million.
I mean, Elon Musk was on the phone call with Zelensky. Elon Musk is expected to join former Trump at the House Republican Conference meeting this morning. Look, when you buy somebody like Musk did...
Yeah.
You expect to get some use out of the tool that you bought.
Yep. So you just declare that you're going to do those things, and if it's illegal, it's somebody else's problem.
Is J.D. Vance going? Of course not.
Right. No.
Useless guy. He's vice president now. Bucket of warm spit.
Yes, and might not even be warm at this point. So, all right. So Elon Musk gets to run around saying whatever he feels like.
He can jump up in the air.
Yeah.
He likes that. He can do calisthenics.
So, okay, merch. Fine. He needs more money. That's what's...
I also am looking for, but haven't seen yet, the commentary and analysis of Muslim Americans who voted for Trump on the appointment of Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel. I'm really pretty interested to see what they'll say.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I guess
Harold
so.
Pollack points that out and says, watch the way he treated his old girlfriend, because that's the way he's going to treat you.
Who, Huckabee? Did he have him?
Trump.
Oh, okay, Trump. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I'm like, does Huckabee have an old girlfriend?
No,
Maybe.
Trump's got a half a dozen, but
yeah, well.
okay. Look, I mean, this is the
it's a narrow slice.
FAFO part of the election.
Yes.
This is where you find out.
I mean, Muslim Americans who affirmatively voted for Trump are going to be a very narrow slice of people, and not all protest voters. I mean, my understanding was that at the end, most Muslim Americans chiefly concerned with Palestine, and not all Muslim Americans are particularly concerned with Palestine, came to the realization, no, Trump will be much worse. If my issue is Palestine, that's not going to work. Even a protest vote won't work. But of course, there are Muslim Americans who are wealthy developers who are voting for Trump not because of
many
protesting
Muslim
Palestine,
Americans
but
did not vote for Trump. I'm excluding them from my comment, but there are people who voted for Trump.
Right.
And
there are a
they're
few
the ones that are going to find out what they voted for.
Who did so to say, I'm going to punish Harris for being part of the Biden-Harris administration.
Frankly, at this point, I don't really care what the reason is.
Okay, well.
It doesn't matter.
I guess not. But they will find out.
This is what's going to matter, the FO part.
Yes. It's pretty bad. I guess there's an argument that it's difficult to make it any worse. So from that perspective, who cares? But yeah, this conflict has been going on for a very, very long time. Even just this round of it has been going on for over a year. It could be put to a stop pretty quickly in a way that would be devastating and horrific, and they really would like to do that, and you're going to watch that happen. It will be their fault when they do it, but you will wonder what you did.
This goes back to Occupy and before. I just have voting for Ralph Nader. I have no patience for protest movements that do the opposite of what you claim you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's difficult to get along with. You said, but I did the opposite. I guess I don't trust you. I liked your idea. I just didn't know how to get there. And then, as it turns out, neither did you.
Yeah,
you knew how to get further away.
The wrong possible way that got us in the opposite direction. So, maybe I won't listen to you next time.
Yeah, right. I'm definitely not going to take your answer for that riddle about the two robots.
I think I'll look it up instead of using your advice on which way to go.
I might even just ask an AI chatbot rather than ask you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the way that goes. So, Andy Beshear.
Yes,
Andy Beshear posts this piece informing us that he's the governor of Kentucky, which is really important.
Thank you for the note, sir. All right.
That's a community note. I think his headline was a community note from the New York Times. He probably didn't write that.
Yeah. Where is this going to be published? In the New York Times. Okay, well, then my headline needs to be, I am the governor of Kentucky.
No, Andy Beshear is governor of Kentucky, because they probably have no idea who he is.
Is he opening a restaurant? Is he a famous chef? Can I get in? No, he's the
Among the many
Kentucky.
things he writes about how you have to listen to people and, the usual stuff that everybody says after you lose. Well, we have to listen more.
What?
I haven't seen a losing candidate not say that. I needed to listen more to the people who were voting against me.
Trump didn't.
You don't have to listen to them when you win, but if you lose, you must listen to the people who voted against you.
Well, I don't know. In 2020, those people are crazy and they didn't exist. So he's different.
So among the things Beshear writes, he says, the Democratic Party must show the American people it cares about creating a better life for each and every American and re-earn the public's trust about its focus and its direction. None of this means we abandon important values and principles. As governor, I have vetoed numerous anti-LGBTQ and anti-choice bills, but I still beat Mr. Trump's hand-picked candidate last fall. That happened because even if some voters might have disagreed with the vetoes, they knew the next day I'd be announcing new jobs, opening a new health clinic, or finishing a new road that would cut 20 minutes off their commute. And I would remind people the reason that Josh Shapiro was popular as governor of Pennsylvania is he rebuilt a road that burned in a huge accident involving, I think, an oil truck, and the road literally burned down. And he built the bridge back, he built the road back in record time. People like that.
Okay.
They knew, he writes, my focus and effort was on their daily needs, and that our gains as a commonwealth would help every single one of our families. You know, I'm not from Kentucky. Every time I read that it's a commonwealth, I go, why are you talking about Massachusetts here?
Hey,
oh, yeah.
Virginia.
Commonwealth of Kentucky. Commonwealth of Virginia?
Yep.
There's a few.
Yep.
It's not the great state of Louisiana, but, you know,
right.
It's important. Anyway, it would help every single one of our families. Earning trust and showing people you care about them also requires that we talk to people like normal human beings. As one person put it in a focus group. You keep calling him an authoritarian. What's an authoritarian? You know, what's a Brazilian?
How many?
He's saying that he is a dictator. People understand that.
All right.
And that we are not afraid to share our why. For me, says Beshear, my why is my faith, and I share it proudly. I vetoed anti-LGBTQ legislation last year because I believe all children are children of God. That's a great answer. And, you know, people need to talk about that more. And in no way, shape, or form is listening and reevaluating the voters who didn't vote for me. That doesn't include throwing your allies under the bus. That includes Latinos, by the way. Everybody has a different explanation for how come Latinos didn't vote in the big numbers they did. And the answer is because they didn't want to. And that doesn't mean you have to throw them under the bus and say they're not allies anymore.
Oh, well, yeah, don't.
Don't do that. So he says, Andy Beshear says, while others are talking about political strategy, messaging, the way forward is really about focus and about action. The next several years are the Democratic Party's chance to show the American people will not just run on, but also govern by addressing these core issues. And he's right, of course, and we get to see what internment camps really look like because they're going to do it. And so that's bad.
Yes. We've done it before.
Here's another "You Got to Listen to People" article. This one is by John Della Volpe, pollster who specializes in the Ute vote.
Oh.
And he says, the excuses for Kamala Harris's loss are piling up, but they mask a deeper, more devastating reality. Democratic Party leaders did not listen deeply to and earn the trust of young voters who could have helped her prevail in Michigan and other swing states. This is good because it's a reminder of this was actually not a runaway route. This was not Reagan. As a pollster who focuses on the hopes and worries of these Americans, losing to Trump not once but twice represents a profound failure. Miss Harris's campaign needed to shift 1 percentage point of voters across Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to secure the presidency.
Well,
not a lot of votes.
Should have done that.
Should have done it. But instead struggled in college towns like Ann Arbor and other blue places. Flipping just 1 in every 100 voters would have stopped the likelihood of mass deportations, tax cuts for the wealthy, rollbacks of LGBTQ protections, and reversal of climate regulations. So this was a winnable race. We didn't do it because Gen Z didn't vote for us in big enough numbers, for whatever reason. Well, I find the excuses for why they didn't vote for her actually pretty compelling, which is basically the economy, and they're in a bad place and they don't trust institutions.
Yeah, but then there too, I guess I would say, well, now I don't feel exactly the same way about it, but here again, you've done the opposite of what you needed to do here.
This is the FO part.
Yeah. But hey, it's a rite of passage.
You didn't live under George W. Bush. You're not old enough to remember.
Right.
You didn't live under Reagan. You're certainly not old enough to remember.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's still inexplicable to me. Like, okay, I know everybody keeps saying, well, Gen X, they grew up under Reagan. I know. And like every time you wanted to go, by the time you grew up under Reagan, when it was time for you to go get a job, you were under George H.W. Bush, and there weren't any to be had. And, every time you went out job searching and there was a Republican in charge, you couldn't find anything. Don't you remember this?
But every one of these reports you read, whether it's Della Volpe, who's very good, even Andy Beshear, you read any of them, and you get the same through line here. I talk to these voters, and I'm surprised they didn't wind up voting for Harris. But what they tell me, whether it's a Sarah Longwell focus group or whether it's an article like this, is I get all the objections about Trump, but I just don't trust Harris. And I'm thinking to myself, this is Princess Bride stuff.
I guess.
Trust. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, I've never. What can you do? I mean, and maybe it doesn't. And the reason that it doesn't mean what they think it means is that they're using it to mean something else. Like I'm
not going to vote for her, and this is what I'm telling you why.
Right, and
but why won't you vote?
Because she's
I'm
her.
telling you, it's trust. Yeah, but that's what do you mean trust?
Yeah, like what do you not trust about her? What has she ever said that people are banking on, and then
well,
it
now
didn't
you're
come
arguing
through?
with me. Look, I'm just trying to understand because what you're saying doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, I guess trust is the lapsed Democrats' economic anxiety.
Something.
Yeah, I'm not saying the thing.
Fact is,
I'm saying this other word.
Prices are too high. Institutions don't fix what they claim to fix. Democrats have been in power and haven't fixed Supreme Court. They didn't fix Dobbs after
that is
it
true.
broke. They didn't fix voting rights after the Supreme Court broke it. That's what I don't trust. That I sort of understand.
Yes, okay. Yes, I do. We sit here at the kitchen table and go over these things, and I say, they're right, but they're...
But now you have a binary choice.
Also not
Are you going to
right.
make it worse?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, well, did I or did I not just stub my toe? Yes, you did, but that axe, it's just not the answer. I'm never going to stub this toe again. Whack! Well, true. I mean, that's the record. You did stub the toe. It's not the toe's fault. Now it won't happen again, that's true, but you're not going to be able to maintain your balance. You're going to fall down the stairs.
Right.
We'll see. That's FO. Can I tell you?
I am of the school of listen to black women, and they will tell you a vote isn't
there you go.
a reward for excellent behavior. Mm-hmm. It's a choice, and the choice is what's the least bad option we have here, and you do what you need to do. And that doesn't mean that you love every politician you vote for, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah,
and
my advice,
don't
don't love any
trust.
of them.
I trust you will listen to my explanation. I don't know.
Yeah. Right. It is hard to argue. Yeah, when you're just sitting down taking the tally on things. Well, why didn't Democrats do this, this, and this? Well, come listen to the show. I'll tell you.
Well, there's some reasons.
It doesn't make me happy.
Why didn't they pick Shapiro? Well, because Walsh was better in the Midwest. But Shapiro would have played great in Dearborn.
Yeah, right. And they lost Pennsylvania because they didn't win Wisconsin either. It doesn't automatically grant you a state. That never happens.
It never has. I mean, vice presidents typically don't matter. And as a matter of fact, there's no question that Harris did better in the places she campaigned compared to the rest of the country. The bottom line is there was a 7-point blue loss, a 7-point red wave, and gaining back 3.5 points or 4 points or 2 points by campaigning really hard and doing everything right isn't going to, overcome the wave. You're still going to drown.
Mm. Yeah.
You want to call that an excuse? That's a fact.
Yeah. Well, it was still a big, it was a bit of a shock and a disappointment, and mostly because we had been spending the time since Dobbs marveling at special elections that were going Democrats' ways in places that they really shouldn't. But then the reminder always is, it's a special election, and weird things happen in special elections. They're special, and they're not general elections.
Here's one of the reasons why you have to keep all of this analysis, with a grain of salt. Like Del Volpe has a specific niche, which is the youth vote. That's what he's going to look at. Mike Madrid is going to look at the Latino vote. That's what he does. Michael Bender in the New York Times says, why has there been a broad drop-off in Democratic turnout in 2024?
The broads, I can't believe it.
Well, he says it spanned demographic and economics. It was clear in counties with high growth rates, counties with the most losses in jobs, counties with the highest percentage of college-educated voters across the board. Mm-hmm. And you look at that and say, yeah, but Harris got more votes than Biden did in Georgia. Harris got more votes than Biden did in Wisconsin. This was 2004, where in Ohio, Kerry hit his marks and got more votes than the last guy, but Bush turned out more. Trump turned out more in those states, and that's how he won. Harris got more votes than Biden did in North Carolina.
Ah.
So when you're looking at she got slightly less votes than he did in Michigan and Pennsylvania. You can't even count Arizona because Arizona depends on Republican switchers. And I'm not even going to look at Nevada because Nevada turns over their voting population every 4 years. So I don't know how you compare it to other times. But it's not across the board that she lost and Democratic turnout was down. And if Democratic turnout was down, then how did we win 4 out of 5 swing state senators? So this analysis doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that's good addition then. I mean, it's the natural inclination in the moment and in the first couple of days following the election that the newspaper is going to serve you what it serves you. A map with red and or blue states.
With
arrows.
arrows.
Look at that. Right. To show the shift, and they now have added arrows. But even with or without the arrows, you look at that. It's the thing Republicans always do. They look at that map and say, like for instance here, well, this is a landslide. Well, again, there's not the same number of people here and there.
Interesting like that. That you should bring up landslide.
I should.
Because Paul Farhi brought that up and said landslide. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Right.
In 2024, Trump looks like he's going to win by 2.2%. In 2020, Biden won by 4.4%.
And they said a squeaker.
2016, Clinton lost by 2.1. Obama won by 3.9 and 7.2. George W. Bush won by 2.4.
Mandate.
In 2000, Gore lost by 0.5. This is like an average, smallish win.
Yeah. No, these are good points.
Not a Reagan landslide.
These are good points. They won't dissuade Republicans. This is for you guys. Yeah, you need to know that this was close and this was winnable and right. So you can't. Well, unless you're, and I can excuse it for the next week or so, living in the camp of, well, there's never going to be an election again anyway, so screw it. Well, all right, feels that way. Maybe
I
true.
understand asking, why did we lose a close race? That's
Yes.
the way Delavolpe frames it, and that's decent.
That's good.
But this was no landslide. And then let me add, this is probably the stupidest take that I've seen from a professional pundit.
No, you should have done this first. Yeah.
Fareed Zakaria, as commented by Isaac Bailey. Isaac Bailey, journalist. Fareed Zakaria says, why did Harris lose? My take, 3 things. 3 big mistakes. 1,
that's wrong.
Not taking immigration concerns seriously enough.
Sure.
And Isaac Bailey says, what? This is stupid. Democrats work with an ultra-conservative senator on an immigration bill. Rallying around prosecutions of Trump. Isaac Bailey says, what? They're supposed to say Trump shouldn't be subject to our laws? And number 3, in Zakaria's view, elevating identity politics. And Isaac Bailey says, look, Harris didn't play up the historic nature of Harris's candidacy. That's the opposite of identity politics. This is a stupid, vapid take.
And it's a common one. It's a very common one. And honestly, he probably should have waited a day so he could be shown. The editor should have said, hold on a second.
Oh, well,
wait a day. I'm going
to you change you're spelled wrong.
Yeah. Well,
I need to spell it Chris Saliza.
I guess. Right. Just say, I want you to wait a day.
Washington take, which is completely wrong.
Right. And if you wait a day, just hear me out. Wait a day to publish your piece. And I'm going to sit with you tomorrow when we're getting ready to publish your piece. And we're going to count the number of other pundits, big-time, big-name pundits who've just published the same thing. Now, I'll also tell you that's wrong. You should be embarrassed to have published that. But just from the standpoint of this is not necessary, and I don't even want to pay you for this column because there's already 500 of these out there. I want you to wait and see this. And then think, what can I do that's different that will make people want to pay me for my column? And then start over. That would have been sufficient. This is definitely there's a pundit epidemic here of people saying exactly that, of taking some cartoon version, I guess, of something somebody said offhand about the way the Harris campaign actually worked, and then writing and crying about that. A straw man campaign that they invented that didn't happen, and they blame that for the loss. And I don't know what it is, but all the big name pundits, if you're, just taking your top line analysis from that, and intentional, unintentional, I don't know. But you're right. Everybody has done this, and it's just not borne out in fact. It's weird.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, but she didn't run on that.
Right.
She didn't run on any of this stuff.
No.
She did the opposite of what you're saying.
Right. You know what she shouldn't have done
anyway.
is campaigning on lighting haystacks
everybody around the world
on fire.
lost if they're an incumbent because of COVID. And you didn't even mention COVID.
Yeah. I don't know why, but that seems to be the case. Political cartoonists are, publishing pieces about how, she ran on woke ideology. No, she didn't. And that's really where I guess maybe you can piece these things together. Well, I just didn't trust her. Well, what does that mean? Well, I'm not saying. Well, it's starting to sound like you saw her skin and said, must be running on woke. Not even going to listen to find out if it's true. Don't trust her. Walk away.
So today I'm going to end
people.
with Nicholas Grossman in Arc Digital. Interesting piece. Authoritarians want you to quit. Now, he's writing for an educated audience because he doesn't have to find authoritarian. Don't withdraw entirely, he says, but it's okay to partially disengage. The future will be tough, and you're in better position to fight if you stay sane. And then he writes how he himself is adjusting. That's nice. Me, video games. But I'm not disengaging. I'm not disengaging from Twitter.
Right. I have heard this.
As for nationally, he says, don't accept that it's over. It isn't. Politics is a competition for power. And while it may have changed, it never ends. More authoritarian governments in Trump term, too, have fallen. But do accept that this is bigger than you. In 2024, every incumbent party in every developed democracy lost elections. The first time that's happened since measuring began in 1905. Mostly true, PolitiFact says. Every incumbent party lost vote share. I think a few like Modi in India held on. But I don't know if Modi himself was up for re-election in 2024, but his party held on to power. Millions of American voters saw Trump go mask off with authoritarianism and bigotry and voted for him not in spite of, but because of it. And these things are beyond your control. And so people say, well, Harris shouldn't have messaged about that. Well, she did, and people understood, and they got it. If they choose to vote for him anyway, that's not on her. That's on them.
Yes.
So do something you can control. Rake your lawn. Didn't solve anything, but felt good. But just be aware. These are big picture things, and sometimes you don't have control over everything, no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you work.
Yes.
And so if Harris lost, not your fault. It was good you put the effort in. She would have lost worse.
Yes. All right. These are important pieces of the puzzle, and thankfully still counting the votes, still analyzing things, and but it's definitely the case once again that instant weirdo, sometimes unbased in any sort of reality or objectivity analysis from pundits is, here's the map of red and blue, you can see how much red there is, so therefore landslide, and if landslide, must be because anti-woke, and now that's a thing. And hey, just look at the guy in the cowboy hat who's going to be Secretary of Defense. It must be true. The whole thing was about woke or not woke. Even though, again, I've been telling you that story in miniature here in Loudoun County. How many people across the country, if they've heard of Loudoun County at all, have heard of it because of parent protest?
Yeah, apparently you don't have schools anymore.
Yeah.
You closed them all down.
Right, that's true. And then, as it turns out, what's his name? Kevin Roberts, the guy from Project 2025, the big chief there who has his own book coming out, has a specific hit list of institutions that need to be burned to the ground. This is what we were discussing yesterday. Very interesting mix of targets. Chinese Communist Party, I think I can understand that one. Every Ivy League institution, every Ivy League university, which also is interesting. I, by the way, would challenge people around the country to name them all. There are only 8, and they're actually all very well known, and yet they say Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Yeah, okay. Well, at any rate, that, and then the list extends to the Boy Scouts of America, which was a bit of a surprise entry, and for specificity's sake, Chinese Communist Party, New York Times, Ivy League, and the Loudoun County Public School System. That's it. The only county in America has to have its schools burned to the ground. They are so angry that despite it all, they've never won here.
County,
Yes, and I got two of them.
Really specific.
Yes, absolutely true. So my kids are on the list here. There's a Eagle Scouts
also,
from
the
Loudoun
Chinese
County.
Communist Party of Loudoun County is like top of the list.
No, but the food is delicious. So the
Michael
Chinese
Cohen,
Communist Party,
the
and
author.
everybody gets the same amount.
Yeah,
That's
Michael
the best part.
Cohen, the author,
Yeah.
Speech Boy, says a lot of the commentary around Pete Hegseth seems to be missing the biggest problem with his nomination. Not that he has terrible political and policy views. It's that he's being asked to run the country's largest bureaucracy, and he has zero managerial experience.
Yes, but he has an Ivy League education, which we're burning to the ground. But that's another one. He came to mind because a lot of these people who are being named to these positions are all the product of, but they're the good ones. They came through these Ivy League institutions thinking right, and there are enough of them to fill a Trump administration, so maybe they're doing okay there after all. No, doesn't matter.
Also, Hegseth said things that will likely alienate his biggest institutional constituency, the uniformed military.
Are they in
This
on
is
this?
a disaster waiting to happen, and there's truly no way this ends well. Not for Hegseth, not for Trump, not for the Pentagon, not for the U.S. military. So this will be interesting.
Good for Putin.
This is
though.
part of the FO part of FAFO.
Yeah, that's true. By the way, I'll just add to that. There's also was some discussion yesterday, announcements. One of Trump's initiatives is going to be, he says he's going to establish some sort of outside board to review the advancement within the brass ranks in the armed forces and basically have a big veto over top generals so that he can get Hitler generals. But I did see somebody pointing out this is how you get military coups in this or any other country. Jeopardize the advancement of the top ranks politically. Should be very interesting. Good mix between this and Hegseth. We'll see you tomorrow? No, that's right. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And Cold Ease Lozenge number 2 is down. These things really do last almost exactly half an hour. And now I'm parched and I can't continue. So, okay. That is to say, I can't continue with the lozenges. Greg will be here tomorrow, by the way. I misremembered. He had told me at some point that he had a Thursday where he had to schedule time away, and I guess it's next week. But you will know for sure tomorrow when you tune in and you hear him and say, I now realize it is not today. So, and of course I tried to squeeze that in before the break. I don't know whether we actually made it or not, and it gave him no opportunity to respond and say, no, I'm here tomorrow. Well, he is. Okay, so now other things to round up. Might have to do it like lightning round style. My email is open here, and so I see all of the alerts from the Hill. I apologize for the fact that they're all from the Hill, but let me read the top headlines here, and we'll dive into a couple of them and see what we make of what's going on here. So in reverse chronological order, starting from the top of the inbox here, we have first that Jack Smith, the special counsel, is expected to resign ahead of Trump's inauguration. If you're wondering, is he going to hang on and make Trump fire him, the answer is no. He's going to resign ahead of time, and I don't know whether that's good or bad or indifferent or what his reasoning is for it, but perhaps we'll take a look. I have already in pocket a HuffPost article about it, and so in the interest of diversifying our sources, we'll go with the HuffPost write-up on this one. Special counsel Jack Smith to resign before Trump takes office, according to reports. Smith reportedly will resign before President-elect Donald Trump gets the chance to fire him. Liza Heron, Hearon, is responsible for this piece. If you don't like it, call Liza. Special counsel Jack Smith and his team at the Justice Department who investigated and charged Donald Trump, you may have heard about it, will step down before the president-elect takes office and potentially makes good on a promise to fire him. The New York Times and NBC News both reported on Wednesday. So I'm reading you the HuffPost finding out that the New York Times and NBC News found out that this happened. The Hill is telling you that HuffPost heard from the New York Times and NBC News that it happened. Smith and his team had been assessing how best to wind down the ongoing investigations against the former president since he is said to have won the election, and the Justice Department has a long-standing policy that a sitting president can't be prosecuted, nor can a president self-pardon. Now, that one's going to go out the window, but also it should be pointed out that, there are a number of co-conspirators in all of these charging documents, and there's certainly no Justice Department norm against prosecuting those people, but they're just not gonna, I guess. And I mean, the upshot of it is, of course, when Trump is inaugurated, he can simply order the Justice Department to drop those cases as well. So it may be that there's no practical difference in having Smith exit early, but I don't know whether there's any advantage to it, and I don't know if there is one, whether he wants to say what it is, because then Trump will set himself about the task of undoing it somehow. All right, let's see. Trump has continually blasted Smith, turning him into a hated figure in the MAGA world and saying he would fire him, quote, in 2 seconds after his inauguration. And by the way, I want to point out, there are a number of you who are unhappy, I guess, probably with Smith in general, or the speed with which he was moving. And there are also a number of you who quite correctly have pointed out, and very often pointed out with Marcy Wheeler's help, that it's not entirely clear that there could have been swifter or more aggressive movement by anyone else. But I do want to go back to this point, I guess, which is that, like with secretaries of defense, so often when Democratic presidents come into office, they prove their bona fides as national security types by saying, well, I will appoint a Republican Secretary of Defense, and then we won't be subject to any criticism on defense policy because Republicans won't criticize Republicans. And that kind of never really worked and was never really true in this context. It's certainly never true in the Trump era. But I want to point out that alongside secretaries of defense, and yes, eventually Democratic presidents did nominate Democrats as secretaries of defense. Similarly, Democratic presidents tend to rely on the same logic when it comes time to name special counsels, particularly special counsels who are charged with investigating Republicans. I will nominate a Republican to be special counsel to investigate this Republican, and therefore eliminate the all too obvious criticism of the investigation that it is a partisan witch hunt. Because no, he's a Republican. By the way, how many of you there in the audience or in greater United States of America remember that Jack Smith is a Republican? How well did that serve you? So, okay. That also is kind of a dumb policy and doesn't really yield anything. But it also doesn't mean that nominating a Democrat to those jobs is going to spare you the attacks of partisanship. It won't. Nothing will, so you might as well perhaps consider nominating a Democrat. But on the other hand, I will say this. Following the election, all of the wise heads that are the mainstream top-line big-name pundits are analyzing an election that didn't happen and telling you, no, Harris did lose because she was running on woke ideology and wouldn't focus on the border and da-da-da-da, all of which is just plainly not true. So how do you make a play for naming a special counsel, for instance? I'm going to break with tradition. I'm tired of this stupid thing. It never works anyway, hiring Republicans to investigate Republicans. Let's just hire a Democrat to investigate this Republican and do so aggressively and move quickly. I'll be scolded by the pundits. So who cares? You'll be scolded by the pundits anyway. It doesn't matter whether you could run for president of the United States in front of everybody on a coherent platform, and they will say, "What's the platform? She won't tell us." Or, "Why won't she sit for an interview?" Or, "How come she's running on woke?" Not happening. But they're going to do it anyway. I'm not really sure how to deal with that. I just want to put that out there. So anyway, Trump has continually blasted Smith, turning him into a hated figure in MAGA world and saying he would fire him in 2 seconds after his inauguration. But he's Republican. Doesn't matter. Certainly never mattered for Trump. Smith seemingly will get ahead of that firing by ending the 2 outstanding federal cases against Trump. He could also issue a full report and make any criminal referrals before Trump takes office. He could. The Supreme Court threw a wrench into Smith's work. Let me also mention this before I continue on. He could issue a full report, make any criminal referrals before Trump takes office. True. Now, he could do that and then just sit there and say, "I'm still special counsel. Trump's been inaugurated. Make him fire me." But if he fires you, you're not going to be able to issue your report. No, I already did. Why go through the indignity? I guess there's that. What is it going to do? Nothing. You could, now I'm a martyr. Well, to who? I don't really know. I'm not certain that anybody would think so. So maybe it's better to just say, yeah, I can see the writing on the wall. I'm not an idiot. I'm going to leave. But I don't know. The Supreme Court threw a wrench into Smith's work in July when it ruled that presidents have immunity for actions taken in an official capacity. But, you should keep in mind that they only mean Trump, not anybody else. They wrote the opposite, but they mean not anybody else. Certainly never a Democrat. But how could they have such a weird and obviously duplicitous doctrine? This doesn't apply to Democrats. I don't know. What about the one where we're just not going to analyze how a Democrat runs for president correctly? I don't know. So let's see. They threw a wrench into Smith's work with their immunity ruling. This resulted in a federal judge dismissing one of Smith's case, sort of. It was Aileen Cannon, so who knows what resulted in what with her head. But it resulted in a federal judge dismissing one of Smith's cases, the one that charged Trump over mishandling classified documents by keeping them in his Perva-Lago sex dungeon estate in Florida. Smith appealed this ruling, and oral arguments haven't been heard yet, and maybe they never will be. Even though that was the open and shut case, he did have those documents and shouldn't have had them and didn't take care of them properly right in front of everybody. But that's the case that got dismissed. The other case involves Trump's alleged conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 election. This forced delays and revisions to the indictment, and deadlines in the case were all pushed back until December. Experts expect the case to get thrown out when Trump takes office. They'll get thrown out at the request of the Department, quote unquote, Department of Justice of the United States of America, who will walk into court and say, everything that guy just said, I need Greg's help on that one. Everything that guy just said.
That's bullshit.
Exactly. All right. And who was that guy? Oh, that guy was me. Or the guy in the legal terms, they say, the guy in whose shoes I'm standing. That guy's shoes are covered in both. You know what? I know. We may have to throw out the rules about all of our bleeping at some point during the Trump administration. It would just be, they're going to get rid of the bureaucracy that says we can't curse on the radio anyway. And we're not even on the effing radio. I don't know. I'm old school that way. Me, Generation X. I don't curse on the air. I do that in social media. All right. So let's see. Other things that are in the inbox that have got to be addressed. Let's see. We'll run down the list here some more. There's an article in The Hill that I did put into Pocket, which has somehow disappeared. Pocket has disappeared, but we'll go back to it. Here we are. The Hill noting here a trend in the nominations that Trump is making, and maybe we just need the headline and that's it. Trump rewards lawmakers who backed him during impeachment. Emily Brooks and Brett Samuels, I guess, having gone through the list of people getting appointments in the new administration, it's very heavy in, I guess, legislators who backed him during impeachment. And there were 2 impeachments to choose from in backing him. So I guess here they're thinking of Marco Rubio, who wouldn't vote to convict him, and what's her name? Elise Stefanik, who was such an outspoken critic of impeaching him at all, and she's got a reward coming. Lee Zeldin, same deal for him, in case you were wondering why him. John Ratcliffe, also back on the list and getting appointments. So it's, they take a closer look at all of this, but I just wanted to sort of put it out there as that's a generalized theme, and I think we're not done with that story, so we'll just note it for the record and see if the trend continues. There are, let's see, a few other fun things. There's, a New York Times is covering this is how they handle the thing not being a department. It does say, it says, Trump says Musk and Ramaswamy will lead, quote, Department of Government Efficiency. And they do refer to it throughout as a quote-unquote department, which, of course, it isn't. And it was Don Moynihan, I think, on Blue Sky, who I saw saying, yes, please, newspaper reporters, I implore you, do not refer to this as a department. That is a very specific thing, and it requires legislative action, and they're not going to have that legislative action, or they haven't at this point, and there's no real reason to think that they will. But in the meantime, at least, you should at least put some scare quotes around this thing so that people say, what do they mean by quote-unquote department? And look into it. All right, let's see. Other things that are of importance. There's the Hegseth pick. Okay. Here, this one struck a chord for me, and I looked at it last night. Let's see if we can't get up to date on what's happening, because we like to do if there are new listeners to the show, one of the things we used to be able to explain to you is procedural rules, both in the legislative chambers and occasionally administrative procedural rules, judicial procedural rules. But since so many of them are just going to be thrown out the window, I guess will be a useful guide for how it used to work and why people are mad about it not working that way now. But in the meantime, there are still some rules still on the book, and I guess we can discuss some of those. Here, a story from the Hill. Freedom Caucus chair moves to undo rogue floor procedure call. All right, let's catch up on this one. I had the story, I think, in pocket of the original, rogue move, but then I guess they got scared away from it too. Is this a headline change on the same thing? Yeah, originally I had an Emily Brooks article here from the Hill. Freedom Caucus's rogue procedural move raises questions about consequences. And I think that's had a headline change since too. Maybe we start there. Key members of the House Freedom Caucus went rogue with parliamentary procedure on the House floor, while GOP leaders were far away and focused on other matters on Election Day, raising questions about whether the group or its chair will face any repercussions. And with House GOP leadership elections and rules considerations also occurring this week, how leaders handle the matter will be closely watched by the party's conservative hardliners. Representative Andy Harris, who will be the new Freedom Caucus chair, or is the new Freedom Caucus chair, and Representative Bob Good of Virginia, its former chair, broke normal House protocol with their surprise move to try to kill the Social Security Fairness Act, which, I don't know whether it's got any fairness in it or not, but that's the title they gave it. And that would eliminate provisions that reduce benefits for some government retirees. So I think what's going on here, without being having all the text in front of me, is somebody came up with the Social Security Fairness Act. It would eliminate provisions that reduce benefits for some government retirees. And the Freedom Caucus probably gets wind of this and says, some government retirees are terrible, horrible, woke activists, and we want to get rid of them and impoverish them in their old age, whether we're correct about this or not. So we're opposed, I guess, to the Social Security Fairness Act that would have eliminated provisions that would have reduced their benefits. We want to eliminate the provisions that would have eliminated those provisions and go back to reducing benefits for those government retirees. All right, they're opposed to the bill. What did they do? The bill has broad bipartisan support with 330 co-sponsors, but it was at the center of division in the House GOP, the caucus there, the conference, in September, when enough Republicans joined with Democrats to sign on to a discharge petition to force a vote on the bill. Now, so the Republican leadership that controls the floor schedule was preventing this thing from coming to the floor, but it had broad bipartisan support, and apparently it had enough signatures. You need to get the majority of the House, so 218 in a full House, to sign a discharge petition, and that starts a very slow and unwieldy process of moving the leadership out of the way and saying there's going to be a vote on this thing anyway. So apparently that happened in September. They got the signatures they needed. Some GOP critics not only disagreed with the underlying legislation, seeing it as too expensive. I think what they really were after was, we wanted to punish some government employees and you're trying to stop us. But they also saw the tactic of going around leadership and using a discharge petition to force a vote as a major breach of party loyalty. Successful discharge petitions are very rare, and they're right about that. And they are, in fact, seen as disloyalty to the leadership, but they're seen as necessary disloyalty. I believe in the necessity of this bill so much that I don't care that my leadership opposes it. I oppose them for opposing it. So it is a rare thing. The House was set to take action on the underlying bill when Congress returned after the election. So that's when they were going to actually have the vote. But the move from Harris and Good aimed to eliminate the requirement to do so. They've signed a discharge petition. They've gone through the unwieldy process. And the leadership says, all right, you beat us fair and square. When we come back from the election, we'll have the vote that your discharge petition entitles you to. So what do Harris and Good do? Well, during a pro forma session of the House, when a member of the majority party is tasked with formally gaveling in and out, fulfilling the constitutional requirement that neither chamber of Congress adjourns for more than 3 days without the consent of the other. There are many reasons to have pro forma sessions. The one we talked about the other day was sometimes they hold pro forma sessions so as to not be considered in a long enough recess that recess appointments can be made. Remember, Trump just used the term recess appointments the other day, wrongly, but here's why. One of the other things that they do with, sometimes they hold pro forma sessions to prevent nominations from being made, and sometimes they just do it because, it says, well, if you adjourn for more than 3 days without the consent of the other house, there's something wrong with that. I don't know what happens if you do that. Nobody goes to prison or anything, but so they say, all right, you stay here, gavel in, and then gavel right back out again. We trust you not to do anything crazy because you're a member of the majority party. Well, occasionally every once in a while somebody says, why don't we sneak in during the pro forma session where there's nobody around to fight us and try and pull some kind of stunt? And the answer is because when the leadership gets back, they will break both your legs off at the hip if you do that. But what if they won't do that? Well, I guess we'll find out because that's what happened. So Good and Harris, during a pro forma session of the House, decided to try something else, right? Sessions typically, usually under a pro forma session, last only a few minutes and see no significant legislative action. But that changed when Harris presided pro forma at 5 p.m. EST, that's Eastern Standard Time, we're back on that, on Election Day, when party leaders were scattered across the country and members had their attention on the election. What happens? Harris is in the chair. Good shows up and says, I ask unanimous consent to lay H.R. 82 on the table, Good said, which would kill the requirement to consider it. No other members were present to object to the request. House staff could be heard on a hot mic telling Harris to say, "The chair cannot entertain the gentleman's request." That's how you block it. If one rogue guy shows up and says, well, I move to lay H.R. 82 on the table. That is to say, H.R. 82, I guess, is the Social Security Fairness Act. And you lay it on the table. It doesn't necessarily kill it, but it's a move that through, I guess you could spend 2 hours trying to explain why they consider that to have killed the bill, when you can also go back in there and say, I ask unanimous consent to take H.R. 82 from the speaker's table and bring it to consideration. You can do that, but for whatever reason, tabling it is said to represent its death. And I think we might have explored that one day, but it doesn't occur to me offhand why that is the case, considering it can be undone. But anyway, the point is that ordinarily if one rogue guy shows up and say, well, I move to table this bill I don't like, and I ask unanimous consent to do it, and I know there's nobody else in here, what usually happens is the guy in the chair hears from the parliamentarian, well, what you should say, sir, is that the chair cannot entertain the gentleman's request. Now, why can't the chair entertain the gentleman's request? The chair can entertain the gentleman's request. But if you say you can't, he will say, why not? I appeal the ruling of the chair. And you will say, I can't entertain that request either. Where, the motion is on adjournment or we stand adjourned. You just don't, if you don't recognize the person speaking on the floor, that, not in, I don't know who you are, but the sense of, I don't recognize you as having been given the floor and the right to speak. And you can say that. And sometimes you can say it because you have, in fact, heard what that person has had to say. And you say, well, I don't recognize your right to speak. I'm closing the place down. And you can gavel out and then turn off the cameras, and then everybody else can scramble to figure out why that happened and whether it was legal, but do it later. That's what you usually do if you have one rogue guy on the floor. But if you have two rogue guys on the floor, and one of those guys has the gavel, here's what you do. I ask unanimous consent to lay H.R. 82 on the table. The parliamentarians say, Mr. Harris, say, the chair cannot entertain the gentleman's request. But what Harris does is he says, why is that? And that also comes through on the mic. And after several minutes of discussion, covering the mic, etc., Harris overruled the directions. Yes, you don't have to take the advice of the parliamentarian, even if it's the only advice that makes sense. Even if there's 250 years of precedent for what they're saying. You can say, I don't know, to hell with that, let's do the thing that I want to do. Because I'm in cahoots with the other guy on the floor. There's just two of us, but we're doing this as a plan. Can you do it in the Senate? Why don't you just overrule the parliamentarian in the Senate? Well, reasons. And this is what makes people say, well, Democrats, what have they ever done for me? Why don't they fight this way for me? Why don't they do something? Why don't they expand the Supreme Court? Why don't they pass X, Y, Z? Why don't they just force it through? Why don't they just nuclear option something? And the answer is they just don't. They think it's wrong to do things that way. Might they be wrong about being wrong? Maybe. So yeah, you have a point. They don't do those things. Those things are generally bad. We like a rules-based, predictable order. Yeah. But Republicans don't care, so go ahead, right? They'll accuse you of being... if you did any of this stuff, they would accuse you of a legislative coup. Yeah, well, they'll accuse you of that anyway. That also is true. Gee whiz. Well, anyway, here's what happens here. Harris says, why do I have to do that? And so instead of saying the gentleman, the chair cannot entertain the gentleman's request, he says instead, without objection, so ordered. And after Harris adjourned, a staff member could be heard saying, that didn't even do anything. True, but they were still mad about it nonetheless. So they tabled H.R. 82. But it is the members' understanding that the move was, in fact, successful in nullifying the discharge petition. We'll see whether everybody has that understanding or not. But that's how the Hill article expresses it. It's been tabled. So for now, the bill is dead, and that doesn't mean it can't be resurrected, Good told the Hill on Friday. Outgoing Representatives Garrett Graves of Louisiana, a sponsor of the Social Security Fairness Act, had a sarcastic rebuke. Now that this new precedent has been created, I plan to seek unanimous consent to send every American a pony, Graves said in a statement. Yeah, well, you probably won't be able to do that either.
Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KGrowX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I know we're focusing on some small bore stuff, but it's a procedural, and everyone loves procedurals. Police procedurals, very popular on television. So we're going to make the congressional procedural, I guess, eventually as popular as well. So there we have it. I know it might be deep in the weeds for some of you who haven't been through this before, but it is a rather remarkable occurrence, to say the least. And I guess there's a follow-up article on it here. But, okay, so Graves, who sponsored the legislation, Garrett Graves, is very upset and had only sarcastic things to say about what happened. But beyond the sarcasm, the move from Harris to use pro forma to take control of the floor risks backfiring on the hardline conservative wing. It is unclear whether Harris or the House Freedom Caucus could face repercussions for the move. Good doesn't give a damn one way or the other. He's departing Congress at the end of the term. That is a kind way of saying he got defeated in a primary. So he's lost election. He has not been reelected, so he's leaving. He's departing Congress at the end. He was kicked out. He was defeated at the polls. But anyway, so he doesn't care one way or the other. So what's you might say maybe one of the things to look out for is rogue activity by people who are lame ducks during pro forma sessions. It's not done. But here it was done. And now we'll find out whether there are or are not repercussions. And if they're not, then you wonder, why don't people do this more often? And the answer is because for you, there would be repercussions. But for these guys, maybe not. I don't know. Let's see. What's the second piece here? Also from Emily Brooks. I guess as a follow-up, Freedom Caucus chair moves to undo rogue floor procedure call. How do you like this? So I guess the damage didn't last for very long. Representative Andy Harris, the chair of the House Freedom Caucus, has nullified a rogue floor procedural move that he pulled off with outgoing Representative Bob Good last week that raised questions about whether he would face any consequences. I guess the answer is yes, he would. And so, because what other reason would there be to be pushed back out on the floor and say, that thing I did, I take that back? Okay. While presiding over the House chamber in a pro forma session on Election Day, when leaders were scattered across the country, you know the story, Harris approved a motion from Good to kill required consideration of a Social Security bill that drew criticism from conservatives. Harris ignored the directions and the objections of House staff in approving Good's unanimous consent request, a major break of protocol for the sessions that are typically only minutes long and have no significant legislative activity, but are held for constitutional reasons. And the reason, by the way, that everybody, why they do those things and they trust that and go and scatter across the country for Election Day or for whatever they're doing is because they've been told that this is not done, and that if it is done, the person who did it will have their legs broken, and all of the damage they did will be undone, because if you can't promise your members that they are safe in going back to their districts for whatever reason, when you promise them nothing's going to happen, don't worry about it. And then something does happen and they have to worry about it. If you don't fix it, you're going to get your legs broken. I mean, Mike Johnson is Speaker of the House by the slimmest of margins. And you remember what happens when they lose confidence in their speaker and they get rid of them and then they try to find a new one. It's a huge mess, right? So for Harris to pull something like this is one of those, this is a great example of why don't you just-ism. And if you're a new listener here, you may not have heard me discuss that, but it's a very inelegant term that I made up out of nowhere because I had no other term for it. But why don't you just-ism is kind of just what it sounds like. Governance by whim, or not knowing why you can't just do. How come I'm sick and tired of all these politicians in Washington? Why don't they just do the common sense thing? Why don't you just blah, blah, blah? Why don't you just use pro forma session to pass something when nobody's looking? Why don't you just start a Department of Government Efficiency and put a, brilliant businessman in charge? Or why don't you just close the Department of Education because who needs it anyway? That kind of stuff, right? And now you're beginning to find out why you don't just. And this is a very small bore illustration of why, which is great. It helps crystallize the issue. So what happened? On Tuesday, Harris went to the House floor to undo the move. I asked unanimous consent that the order of the House on November 5th, 2024, regarding H.R. 82 be vacated, Harris said. And guess what? His request was granted. Ding. That's all it takes to undo something, right? But, just as it would have also been doable to have the House Majority Leader start business that day by saying, I move to take H.R. 82 from the Speaker's table and move that it, for its immediate consideration in the House. If there was objection, you decide to have a vote, whatever, you've got the votes behind you. It takes 15 minutes, whatever, you just do it. But I thought things that were tabled were dead. Yeah, well, I move that they're not dead. Oh, well, if you have the votes, then fine. Or you do it this way. That thing that there is nationally broadcast video of me doing, let's say I did not do that. All right. Well, if no one objects, I ask unanimous consent that thing that everybody saw, everybody will now say they didn't see it. Or if they did see it, that it didn't mean the thing I said it meant, it means the opposite. Okay. Done. The bill in question is, of course, the Social Security Fairness Act, which, once again, let's see if they describe it any differently, would eliminate provisions that reduce the benefits for some government retirees. No help. Okay. I'd be interested in the details some other day, perhaps. While it has broad bipartisan support and was at the center of controversy, right, this is all borrowed from the previous article. So let's see. Some GOP critics not only disagreed with the underlying legislation, seeing it as too expensive, but also saw the tactic of going around leadership as breach of party loyalty. Again, just lifted entirely. It's not plagiarism. It was the same writer. Though the move from Good and Harris to kill the requirement to consider the bill was successful at the time, it was largely a moot issue. House GOP leadership had already prepared a way to bring up the bill under suspension of the rules. Aha. A different process that requires 2/3 support for approval, but is faster than the discharge petition requirements. And, it wouldn't be any faster, I don't think, than the discharge petition requirements if the bill was ready for floor consideration anyway. But what it does do is bring it to the floor in a way that allows you to say, it didn't come under a discharge petition, so there are still only, vanishingly few examples of success of a discharge petition. This is the success of a discharge petition, but, if you want to goose the stats, and there's going to be a lot of that in the Trump administration, just plain outright fabricating statistics. Believe me, we'll get to that. But if you have an interest in continuing to tell people, don't sign discharge petitions. They never work. It's a dumb thing. Don't sign. I know you're in support of that thing. Don't use it. I know you're in support of the underlying bill, but don't use the discharge petition as a mechanism to get it there. It's a bad thing, and it creates a lot of tension and a lot of disloyalty to the leadership. And we're the leadership. We don't want that. Well, I need to get my constituents want. And okay, we'll bring it to the floor, but under a different procedure. Well, too late for that. We've already gotten 218 signatures on the discharge petition. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. The usual next step is the committee that is busy supposedly considering this bill is now discharged from that responsibility, and the thing can come to the floor. We'll discharge this bill from committee that was bottling it up and schedule it for floor action. But here's what I'm offering. I'll bring it to the floor under suspension of the rules. Why suspension of the rules? A number of reasons, but not the least of which is if we discharge this Social Security bill from the Ways and Means Committee that's usually considering it, but then bring it to the floor under regular order, which everyone loves, regular order. What does that mean? It means it has to make a stop in the Rules Committee, where it could get bottled up again, or changed in its actual substance. And we don't want that. We want to, in good faith, give you the bill that you asked for. So we're going to bring it under suspension of the rules so that it doesn't have to stop at the Rules Committee. It also limits debate, 40 minutes, rather than an hour at minimum. And it makes it, protects it from amendment as well, which I think probably is the case if it's scheduled under suspension of the rule, or rather under a discharge petition too. I don't know if you can amend a discharged bill. That's a good question. We should look that up. But anyway, this will give you what you want, an up or down vote on the bill that you wanted to see discharged from committee. But if it comes to the floor under suspension of the rules, in the official stats, if we ask, did this bill get discharged with a discharge petition? Is that how this works? Is that why this is under consideration right now? Put that down as a no. And you can continue to say, discharge petitions, boy, they just don't work. You're wasting your time. Look at these statistics. Why don't you just hang tight and we'll do it by suspension of the rules later? So that's how they goose their own success record against discharge petitions along the way. Just something I thought I would tell you about. Anyway, so now it's kind of moot. The procedural kerfuffle, though, did secure for conservatives an alternative bill to address the Social Security issue. So they didn't come away with nothing. What did they get in exchange for agreeing for Andy Harris to go to the floor and say, I'm an idiot, undo the thing I did? And, and he didn't have to even say that. And if you're just casually watching, you see him come and say, I ask unanimous consent to vacate the order of November 5th, 2024. That's a very anodyne and unoffensive way of saying, I actually ask unanimous consent that the order of the House on November 5th, which I ordered because I was the presiding officer at the time, be vacated. I've made a huge mistake, and I have to undo it. So what does he get in exchange? Well, H.R. 5342, the Equal Treatment of Public Servants Act of 2023, was also added to the House suspension calendar after the move from Harris and Good. Good told The Hill on Friday that he hoped House GOP leaders would not take up the Social Security Fairness Act. We've been given leadership now, the opportunity to escape what they said they didn't like and didn't want, which was a discharge petition for the bill. Good said. The bill didn't come to the floor through the normal process, and so we've given leadership an exit round. Not even really sure what he's trying to describe here. I hope they'll take the exit round, that they won't try to get back on the freeway to $200 billion. It overcorrects the admitted inequities of the WEP. I have no idea what his gibberish means, but Good was referring here to the windfall elimination provision, WEP, the formula that can reduce benefits for workers who receive pensions. But now that Harris undid the Election Day pro forma move, leaders will again be required to bring up the bill. I know, it gets even more confusing again at the end, but it was just interesting in terms of an example of, well, why don't you just go to the floor and do this? Or why doesn't an enterprising Democrat just sneak onto the floor during one of these pro forma sessions and say, I ask unanimous consent to I don't know, whatever. You pick it. Dress Donald Trump up in a clown suit and kick him in the butt. Well, now, you don't have the power to do that. But why don't I ask unanimous consent anyway? Well, a number of reasons. One, you don't have the power to do it. Two, someone would object to that. Three, what if they didn't, though? Well, if something happened and nobody objected, then they would come back the next day and say, oh, we should have objected to that, and you would undo it this way. So that's the answer to that in terms of the why don't you just-ism story of the day. It's a weird one, but, you got to keep an eye on these clowns. It is really interesting how often they do those things that are just not done, and then nothing really happens to them. And then Democrats are supposed to, are being called upon to do those things that are just not done, but for something of substance, not which version of a Social Security bill that addresses the windfall elimination, but the nature of the Supreme Court. Why don't you just do something about that? Well, one, we don't know that it would stick. And two, Democrats get nervous about that stuff. And who can blame them when you can be accused of running a woke campaign when you have not done that? Or failing to address the border issues when you, in fact, have done that? I don't know. Just saying. All right, let's see. Are there other... looks like there's other bits and pieces of information from the Hill that I'm trying to see if they will remind me of anything that I wanted to add to the conversation. And there is one from the Hill that I was still intrigued by. Emily Brooks is on this one too, with Michael Schnell. Trump's House GOP picks have Republicans worried. I thought that might be interesting to take a look at. House Republican leaders facing another razor-thin majority in the upcoming Congress are hoping President-elect Trump will not tap any more House GOP members for positions in his administration. Trump has already picked Representatives Elise Stefanik from New York to serve as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and Mike Waltz of Florida for National Security Advisor. As I was pointing out to Greg, I was wondering whether maybe Susie Wiles, as chief of staff, might have stepped in and said, yeah, let's put a cap on that for now. I know you want your picks, but for the others where I can advise you before you make your announcement via Truth Social or whatever social media you're using to make formal picks for the cabinet, again, let me advise you, the more House members you pick, the thinner the majority gets. And even if you don't remove enough of them to leave the House without a functioning majority, you never know. If it's that close and it's really down to one or two seats and somebody gets a cold and they're not there that day, you lose control of the House. You don't want that to be the wrong day. But as Greg pointed out, Susie Wiles knows pretty well that Mike Waltz will be replaced with a Republican because it's happening in Florida. And, for the most part, these people are in very red, safe seats. And I think Trump understands at least that much. But again, each one of these things, there's no appointments to the House. They're all by special election. And what did we say about special elections earlier today? They're special. Who's been winning special elections since the Dobbs decision? Democrats have been winning them. But why didn't that hold true in the general election? Because it's a general election and not a special election. Does this general election result mean the end of special election results that surprise everyone because they turn on Dobbs? No, they don't. We don't know yet. We haven't held any. But it's entirely possible that no, they don't. And when there's one election in one place for everybody to concentrate on and decide whether or not it sends a message about, abortion, the pro-choice forces have been surprising everybody for a good 2-year stretch now. So it would be very interesting, and I would say as a Republican operative, if you're Susie Wiles, you probably want to minimize the number of special elections you have to go through, even if they're in Florida. If they're in New York, that much more so. And if these people depart to take their jobs, there's vacancies in the meantime, right? So if you have a 5-seat majority and 2 of your Republicans have left to take cabinet positions, you now have a 3-seat majority. If you have a 2-seat majority and 2 Republicans leave, you don't have a majority anymore. If 5-seat majority and 2 Republicans leave and 3 get a cold, you don't have a majority anymore. Not that day you don't. And if that day is the day that you're voting for Speaker of the House, well, those people either have to come into work sick or you lose control of the House. You might be able to regain it later. Nothing's permanent. But if you nominate too many more Republicans and count on things like, well, those are ruby red districts, or that's Florida, we can definitely win that. You can, maybe, eventually. It's going to take you a couple weeks or months, depending on the special election schedule. But then you also have to go through a special election. And I mean, I'll take it. I don't know if they're good odds, but they're better than zero. I'll take a special election in this one and see what we can do with it. Speaker Mike Johnson said Tuesday that he does not expect Trump to nominate more members for administration positions, but I'll leave that up to him, the speaker added. I mean, he's got every right to say, please stop doing this, but he just can't get wrong-footed with Trump. He just can't. It's unclear what the GOP majority will be in the House next year, but it is sure to be narrow. Decision Desk HQ has projected GOP victories in 219 House seats and Democratic victories in 210, with 6 seats still to be called. 3 in which the GOP candidate currently leads, and 3 in which the Democrat has the edge. If they break that way, then we're talking about what? 219, 20, 21, 22. 222 Republicans and 213 Democrats, and that means 7, 8, 9 seats difference. But, as we've pointed out, with 435 members and many of them, busy, elderly, whatever, some of whom habitually don't wash their hands, perhaps, there's on any given day, 6 to 12 absences for no particular reason. And, if you need to have a majority on hand, you don't when you're doing everything by suspension of the rules, of course. But, Anyway, Stefanik and Waltz will both have to resign their seats to assume administration roles. I mean, let me point this out, too. That used to be true. Maybe it's true now. Maybe it isn't. I suppose you could say, no, I'm both. And if 5 members of the Supreme Court say, sorry with us, then they're both. Why not try it at this point? Hell, we're, tabling bills in pro forma sessions. Presidents have immunity for pretty much anything. There's no emoluments clause. There's no disqualification clause for insurrectionists. There's no more advice and consent clause, maybe. Go for it. Maybe there's no prohibition against holding jobs in both branches at the same time. But okay. Replacing both of them, by the way, could, of course, take months. And in the fractious GOP conference, in which members have frequently broken ranks to hold up legislative activity or stage protests, those 2 votes could make a big difference in what kind of partisan legislation can get to Trump's desk. Johnson said Trump is fully aware of the dynamics and appreciates the numbers game. President Trump and I have talked about this multiple times a day for at least several days, Johnson said, which is actually kind of a backhanded way of saying he might still not get it, because you should really only have to talk about this one time on one day for a fully competent president to get it. But they talk about it multiple times a day for the last several days. Anyway, he goes on to say, we have an embarrassment of riches. They do have embarrassment. I thought that they might not, but I guess they do. We have really talented Republican conference. We've got really competent, capable people here. That's not true. Many of them can serve in really important positions in a new administration. That could be true, just not very well. But President Trump fully understands and appreciates the math here, and it's just a numbers game. We believe we're going to have a larger majority than we had last time. It's too early to handicap it, but we're optimistic about that. But every single vote will count, because if someone gets ill or has a car accident or a late flight on their plane, then it affects the votes on the floor. So I think he and the administration are well in tune to that. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise similarly complimented Trump's cabinet nominations, saying he's making really good, smart picks, So they're not going to criticize, but they are aware of it, and they are aware that they're not necessarily getting through to him because they have to say it over and over again to him. Let's see. The hopeful optimism comes as a number of other House Republicans remain on the short list for various cabinet positions. We don't expect any more, but here's a list of those we expect might happen anyway, because Trump sometimes doesn't listen to anything. Mike Rogers, under consideration for Defense Secretary. I guess that's over, but he could always be made Secretary of one of the branches or something like that, or VA for that matter. But now we know Pete Hegseth got that one. According to Politico, Representative Sam Graves of Missouri is in the mix. Oh, he said he's in the mix. How do you like that? For Transportation Secretary. Missouri Net reported. And Representative Glenn Thompson of Pennsylvania being discussed for Agriculture Secretary, according to Politico as well. It'll take time to fill the rest of the vacancies. And to fill the vacancies left by Stefanik and Waltz, though there is more flexibility in Florida's special election timeline than in New York's. Stefanik's position requires Senate confirmation. Waltz's does not. And it might be that none of them do anymore, because who effing cares? In New York, Governor Kathy Hochul, who is a Democrat, has to announce a special election within 10 days of Stefanik stepping down. And that election will have to take place between 70 and 80 days after the announcement. It remains unclear whether Stefanik will officially relinquish her seat, however. It says when, but I think whether is a better point. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will set the timeline for the special election to fill Waltz's seat, and he has wide discretion to determine that timeline. So I'm not sure what that means exactly, or what the outer limits of the discretion actually are, but apparently it's a real thing. Okay. Just a minute or two left here, and tons of stuff that we just are not going to be able to get to today, but that leaves us tomorrow and Friday to go through them. Let's see. Other pieces of information that we might add to. Let's throw in this news tidbit from the AP. The Pentagon secrets leaker, Jack Tejera, remember him? The kid, essentially, who was working in the Air National Guard somewhere and decided that he was just going to, scan secret documents and share them with his friends online and Discord, etc. Well, doesn't work out so well for you for doing that. Kids, if you're thinking about trying the same thing, 15 years in prison, according to the AP, and thanks to the federal judge sentencing the Massachusetts Air National Guard member to 15 years in prison on Tuesday for leaking classified military documents about the war in Ukraine. Actions, prosecutors said, put the country's national security at risk, endangered other military members, and damaged U.S. relationships with its allies. And lots of tongues wagging about, how many years would Donald Trump have gotten for leaking those documents? But Marcy Wheeler stepping in to say, no, he hasn't been charged with leaking the documents, just with stealing them. Well, it is a distinction that makes a difference. People who steal these things and fail to leak them sometimes only get 3 or 4 years in prison. But that's neither here nor there. No one's going to prison if you do it in the name of Donald Trump. But this guy did it on his own, and he got himself sentenced before Trump took office. We'll see whether Trump can be convinced by Pete Hegseth that somehow this guy should be pardoned too. If, after all, he damaged the interests of Joe Biden's United States in Ukraine, then he probably furthered Donald Trump's interests in Ukraine, which is, of course, surrendering it to Putin, and might need to be pardoned later on. So we'll just put that one on the map for later on and wind up, I think, for the day. There's almost no chance that there's anything else I can fit in here. So at this point, I will just remind you to stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio with, of course, Justice Putnam at the microphone, and we can give you a preview of what's on tap there as soon as there's a nice musical background to do it. We'll put it this way, starting off in the Bistro Cafe. It's almost like Trump fell into Putin's trap on purpose. Gosh, it's beginning to look that way. Let's let Justice explain it to you next. On the rest of the menu, a conservative freelance writer pleads guilty for his part in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. They're still charging people with this stuff. That's nice. A judge recused himself from presiding over Arizona's fake electors case after the MAGA defendants complained about an email in which he told fellow judges to speak out against attacks on Kamala Harris. So, you can't have any people who have different political interests than yours presiding over your case, just as you can't have any special prosecutors who are not Republicans. Okay? And from The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison to Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, Florida education officials report hundreds of books have been pulled from the state's school libraries. After the break in the upcoming program, they moved to the chef's table, where one of the most popular and charismatic figures of the imprisoned Belarusian opposition has resurfaced after more than 20 months, wow, of no contact with the outside world. Someone tell him Trump got reelected. Oh dear. There's a bit more I'll share after this.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
More international news. Police in Antigua have charged a man with murder in the stabbing death of a controversial politician. Well, there might be a lot of that happening around the country and around the world. Hopefully not in this country. But stay tuned for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. We will see you tomorrow with Greg.